I tested starting seeds with worm castings versus with compost. And some of the environments really struggled, others turned purple, some didn't even germinate, and some absolutely thrived. Welcome back to the Mind and Soil Test Garden, and I'm so excited to share these experiment results with you. To get started, let's go back in time 50 days to when I set this experiment up. So before beginning to introduce the compost and worm castings, I knew that I needed to have a control environment. So the first environment is 100% ProMix. And this will serve as our control because it's a great seed starting medium, but it doesn't have any nutrients, organic matter, or microbial life in it. And it's those things that are the exact benefits that we get from compost and worm castings. So this is gonna give us a great baseline to compare the other environments against. Now I'm of course gonna keep every variable the exact same from one environment to the next. I'll be starting all the seeds in 3-inch seed cells, and the variety I'm going with is Butter Crunch lettuce. Additionally, I'm gonna be placing 5 seeds into each environment so that we have 15 seeds in each environment to give us a nice sample size. Now, let's start adding in the compost and worm castings. So environment number 2 is gonna be 66% ProMix and 33% Sea to Sky Soils compost. And this is the exact compost that I use in all my raised beds. It's a 100% organic compost amender that's OMRI organic listed, and it's performed extremely well for me. And so after mixing it up, I'm doing everything the exact same as environment number 1. For environment 3, I'm going with 66% ProMix and 33% sea soil. This is a super popular compost product and it's widely available. And for both of these compost environments, I'm running the compost through a 1/4-inch sift to remove any larger pieces of wood so it's a nice fine particle size. And of course, every other variable in terms of setting the environment up is the exact same. Now for the remaining 5 environments, I'm going to substitute the compost for 5 different brands of worm castings. To begin moving on to environment number 4, we're going with 66% ProMix and 33% Mind and Soil worm castings. These are the worm castings that I sell on my website, and I don't actually think that they're going to win this experiment. So in some ways, I'm kind of sabotaging my own business right now by making this video, but it allows me to continue learning what helps plants grow to their absolute fullest potential, and then share all of those results and amendments with you. And in the long run, my hypothesis is that that will work out really well because you'll be having tons of success as well. So for this environment, I just mixed the 33% worm castings with the 66% ProMix and set up the environment, keeping every other variable the exact same. Now moving on to environment number 5, this is 66% ProMix and 33% Brew Creek worm castings. Now Brew Creek is a farm that I worked at a few summers ago, and they were literally the best worm castings I've ever used. So I'm really curious to see how this environment does compared to the other worm castings and compost. Now for environment number 6, I'm going with 66% ProMix and 33% Young Urban Farmers worm castings. I bought these on Amazon and they have a 4.1 star rating, which is fairly positive. But what I'm most interested in with these ones is that when I got them, they were fully dehydrated in a vacuum sealed bag. And I think the rationale on this is that by removing all of that moisture, vacuum sealing it, you're getting the shipping weight of it down as low as possible. But that moisture, that airflow is exactly what those microbes need in order to stay alive and be beneficial to the plants. So I'm really curious to see how this one does, especially given that it already has a 4.1 star rating. Now for environment number 7, I'm going with 66% ProMix and 33% Terra Flora Organics worm castings. And I'm super excited to see how this one does because Andrew, who's the founder of Terra Flora Organics, is an absolute salt of the earth compost lover. I genuinely don't know if I've met anybody that cares about worms, compost, the soil health as much as he does. And I know that he pours all of that energy and love into the products that he creates. So I'm really excited to see how this one does. Now moving on to our final environment, this is going to be 66% ProMix and 33% homemade worm castings. My parents are avid gardeners, and a few years ago, they built an incredible composting system. And at the top of these bins are absolutely tons of worms and worm castings. So I recently scooped a bunch of that top layer off, put it through a 1/4-inch sift so I was left with just the really fine worm castings, and I've now blended them into the ProMix mixture. So all the environments are set. We're going to get some incredible insight on worm castings versus compost. Let's now pop them underneath the grow lights and fast forward a few weeks for our first check-in. Okay, it is 21 days since we kicked this experiment off, And as you can see, we've already got some pretty significant differences in growth. So in today's update, we're gonna go through the germination rates for each environment, and then I'm gonna thin each of the seed cells down to the one biggest seedling and pop them back underneath the grow lights so we can see which environment grows biggest. So to begin diving in on germination rates, let's get started with environment number 1, the ProMix environment. And what I do want to quickly comment on is that they are looking a little bit leggy, and that is because I started this experiment before I had completed my grow light experiment, which you can find linked up above here. All of my experiments moving forward will be under better grow lights. The results are only going to get better and better. Now, in terms of germination rates, recall that we started 15 seeds in each environment. And so for environment number 1, the number that germinated were 11 out of the 15 lettuce seeds. Let's move on to environment number 2, which was 66% ProMix, but now 33% organic compost. And as we can see here, we are definitely looking at more growth on these plants. And in terms of germination rates, 13 of the seeds successfully germinated. And that doesn't surprise me because that compost retains a ton of moisture, which our seeds need in order to germinate and begin growing. But what happens when we use a different compost? Well, let's move on to environment number 3, which was 66% ProMix and 33% sea soil compost. And these are clearly significantly smaller than both of the first two environments. So I was really surprised to see this because I had heard great things about sea soil, and clearly they're not growing as well. Now, in terms of germination rates, 11 of the 15 germinated. So moving on to environment number 4, we've got 66% ProMix and 33% mind and soil worm castings. And as we can see here, they've definitely put on some really great growth, but pretty similar to the one that just received the compost. And obviously worm castings are a lot more expensive. Now, in terms of germination rates, 13 of the 15 seeds germinated. So let's now move on to our next worm casting environment number 5, which is the Brew Creek worm casting. So the first thing that caught my eye here is that we have a couple of volunteer seedlings also beginning to grow. So there must have been some full tomatoes or tomato slices in what they fed the worms, as I have a couple of tomatoes now growing, looking really good in this environment. And in terms of germination rates, 12 of the 15 germinated in this environment. Now let's move on to environment number 6, which was 66% ProMix and 33% young urban farmers worm castings. And this has completely shocked me. Not a single seed has germinated. Now, as mentioned, when we were setting this one up, I was really kind of skeptical or curious to see how it was going to perform because the worm castings were completely dried out and in a vacuum sealed bag, which is kind of the opposite of what worm castings are meant to be. It's the microbial life, the enzymes, the bacteria that you're looking for from those worm castings, which we would have lost all of when they were dehydrated and then vacuum sealed. So there's definitely more digging that would need to be done to figure out why it was a 0% germination rate, but definitely did not see that one coming. Let's now move on to environment number 7, which was 66% ProMix and 33% Terra Flora Organics worm castings. And here we're looking at tons of growth on these ones as well. I would definitely put these into the top 3 alongside the first compost environment and the mind and soil worm castings. And in terms of germination rates, 15 out of the 15 seeds germinated. So this is the first environment that has had a 100% germination rate. Now let's move on to our final environment, which was 66% ProMix and 33% homemade worm castings. And in terms of the growth, I'd say that these ones are also a little bit behind, definitely not in the top 3 for these initial results. And in terms of germination rates, 9 out of the 15 have germinated in this environment. Now in just a second, I'm gonna fast forward to the next update in this experiment, which is entirely gonna be focused on the overall growth of the plants. But just before we do that, we're gonna do 2 quick things. First, I'm gonna thin all of the seed cells down so there's only one seedling growing in each environment. That's going to allow it to not be competing with any other ones. All the water, all of the nutrients, all of the light is going to be able to get absorbed by one plant. And secondly, and I'm really excited about this, is that I now do have some new, good, strong grow lights. And what if I were to actually remove all of the leggy growth as if it was just getting harvested off? And my hypothesis on this is because I now have stronger grow lights and all the new growth that then emerges from these plants might end up being less leggy and look a whole lot better. So I'm really excited about that update within this experiment. I've got no idea whether or not it's going to work. So let's now pop them underneath the good grow light and fast forward a few weeks for a final check-in on growth results. It's now 50 days since we kicked this experiment off. We've got some super interesting results to look at. So rather than pulling them out in sequential order 1 through 8, what I'm actually going to do is pull them out in terms of performance, from smallest all the way up to largest. So first up is the Young Urban Farmers worm castings, where not a single seed germinated. Now the next environment is actually the sea soil environment. So 66% pro mix, 33% sea soil. The third environment is our control environment, which was just the 100% pro mix. The fourth environment is the one with 33% Brew Creek worm castings. The fifth environment is the 33% compost. So that's the Sea to Sky Soils compost there. Now, for the top 3, they're honestly like too close to tell at the moment. So we're gonna chop them down to the soil, pop them on the scale in just a second. But judging just based off of the eye at first glance, in third place is the 33% homemade worm castings. In second place, we have the 33% mined and soil worm castings. And that means that our winner based on the eye test right now is the 33% Terra Flora Organics worm castings. So wow, clearly a huge difference in growth based on what we added into the soil there. Now, just before we chop them down to the soil level and pop them onto the scale for the final weigh-in, I want to make just a couple of observations. The first one, which I hope is abundantly clear, is remember how leggy they were a little bit earlier on in this experiment? Now they're clearly growing super well. And the one change that I made on that front was I moved them out from being underneath my Monoios grow lights and put them under my new VIVOSUN grow lights. The specific model I'm using is the V100 AEROLIGHT, and everything that I'm putting underneath it is absolutely thriving. On top of that, it's got a built-in fan, which is super nice for blowing the plants around, make them even more sturdy and robust. And it's got a dimmer on it, so I can actually control the light intensity, putting it higher or lower. So if you want to get your hands on one of those grow lights, clearly it really helped these babies out. I'll include a link to those down in the description. Second piece is clearly this one Pro Mix seedling has gone nearly completely purple. My hypothesis on this is that it's just got no nitrogen in it. Remember, we didn't add any organic matter, any nutrients, any microbial life to that environment. And I suspect that if I added some liquid fertilizer or even some 444, it would bounce back and start looking nice and green and lush. But since we're chopping them down in just a second, we won't be able to do that adjustment in this experiment. Now, the third observation is that I'm blown away by how poorly the sea soil environment has performed. Even compared to the other compost environment, it's way behind. And see, I had heard great things about sea soil, but I was curious to test it in this experiment because when I look at it just in my hand, it always has seemed really woody to me. And my fear has been that in order for that wood to break down, it would be stealing the nitrogen from the compost, and therefore the plants wouldn't be getting the nutrients that they need to put on that growth. So certainly want to do more experimenting with it, but pretty blown away by how far behind they are. Now, the last thing that we need to do for this experiment is chop them all down, pop them onto the scale, and see who the real winner is. Here we go with the sea soil. And I got the scale zeroed out, so that comes out to 10 grams right on the nose. Next up, we have our control. Time to say goodbye. Pop these onto the scale. That comes out to 17 grams. Next up, we got the Brew Creek worm castings, and these are definitely a step above the last ones. So let's pop these on here. Woo! All right, that climbs all the way up to 35 grams, so basically doubled the last environment. Okay, next up is the Sea to Sky Soils compost. And just before I put these ones onto the scale, what I would say is that if you're looking for a cost-effective alternative to worm castings, remember these are like a 20th of the cost of the worm castings, and they've grown really quite well. Now let's pop them onto the scale for the weigh-in. Okay. These ones are pretty dense, and that comes out to 33 grams. Like I said, super good value for your dollar. Definitely keep that in mind if you're looking for a cost-effective solution. Now, on to the final 3 to see which one is the actual winner. So here we have that homemade compost / worm castings from my parents' place. Super dense and lots of growth on these ones as well. I think this will be a new leader here. Okay, and number 3. So this now climbs all the way up to 50 grams right on the nose, new leader in the competition. Let's move on to our second last one, which were the Mind and Soil worm casting. Okay, I don't know if these ones are bigger. These are the Mind and Soil worm castings. Let's see, first one, the second one, and number 3 brings us out to 47 grams. So this one actually slides back into third place behind the homemade worm castings. All right, on to our final one here. Let's see if we've got the winner right here. And this is why I love experimenting so much. Super fun to figure these things out. And we've gone from 10 grams all the way up to over 50 grams. So just a massive difference that we've discovered just by running this experiment. Now, for our final weigh-in here, these are the Terra Flora organic worm castings. First one's on, and remember, 50 is the number to beat. And number 3, and that comes out to 56 grams. That is our winner in this contest. Performed super well. I'll include a link to the Terra Flora website down in the description of this video for you. Again, huge shout out to Andrew. He's doing amazing work over there. And that's everything for today. And if you enjoyed this gardening experiment, then subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so you get notified when my next gardening experiment launches next weekend. And other than that, you might also enjoy this gardening experiment video right here. I'll see you in the next video.